Foundation entitled "Firearms Are the Leading Cause of Death for Children in the United States" be included in the record.
Without objection.
And a second article from NPR in April 22nd, 2022, "Firearms Overtook Auto Accidents as the Leading Cause of Death in Children" be made a part of the record.
Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Nagus, is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman. Move to strike the last word.
The gentleman's recognized.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think it'd be helpful to provide some context and perhaps help clear the record a bit, because I've heard differing arguments from my colleagues on the other side, some of which are grossly inconsistent. So, you know, my friend Mr. Massie makes the argument, which I actually think comports with the language of the final rule, that this final rule requires registration. But then I hear my colleague from Wyoming declare that it outlaws these devices. Clearly, that's inconsistent. And, you know, I think Mr. Massie is actually correct on that front. And I think that it's important for us to have an intellectually honest debate. By that same token, my friend Mr. Issa, who's not here earlier, but referenced the Obama administration. I believe a number of my colleagues have done so with respect to the genesis of this rulemaking. No one has referenced the fact that this rulemaking began, at least in part, during the Trump administration. And so let me just take you down a trip on memory lane. In March of 2020, during the Trump administration, a manufacturer submitted a firearm equipped with brace model SBA-3 to the ATF for classification. ATF determined that it was subject to the NFA as a short-barreled rifle because, quote, all of the objective design features are consistent with weapons designed to be fired from the shoulder. That's evidenced by the many videos that my colleague, Representative Cicilline from Rhode Island, showed, and that it defies any of the arguments that were made on the other side of the aisle with respect to the design of the weapon on that front. ATF examined a firearm with a different model brace and reached the opposite conclusion. By late 2020, still during the Trump administration, ATF concluded that there was a need to provide clarity to the firearms industry and the American people on how ATF evaluates firearms equipped with stabilizing braces, and that some manufacturers were adding to the confusion by falsely labeling braces as, quote, ATF compliant when ATF had not evaluated them. ATF determined that for these reasons, and due to the extensive use of these firearms to create short-barreled rifles without following NFA requirements, it was necessary to issue public guidance. This is important. On December 18th, 2020, this is during the Trump administration, not the Biden administration, ATF published a notice in the Federal Register entitled Objective Factors for Classifying Weapons with Stabilizing Braces. That guidance included factors similar to those that are in the final rule at issue in this markup. As you all know, I know many of you signed on to the letter. A few days later, on December 22nd, 90 House Republicans sent a letter to the ATF imploring the ATF to essentially rescind that guidance. And the ATF then ultimately complied. And on December 30th, ATF withdrew the public guidance. 3 months later, a murderer in Boulder, Colorado, used a Ruger AR-556 pistol equipped with an SB Tactical SBA-3 stabilizing brace to kill 10 people, 10 of my constituents. I represent Boulder. I think many of you know that. One of those constituents was a police officer who bravely lost his life, made the ultimate sacrifice. I'm disappointed by the majority's decision to pursue this resolution. I don't get it. And for those who are watching, it's 12:15 a.m. in Washington, D.C. I think the American people can get a very clear picture of the priorities of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, many of whom I consider to be friends. We could be taking up bills to address inflation. We could be taking bills to build safer communities. One of my colleagues talked about the steps to harden schools, to provide security assistance to places of public accommodation. That's something I support. I've introduced a bill for 2 years in a row now. I've been able to get a single Republican to co-sponsor it. But instead, we're here debating a measure to undermine federal law enforcement's efforts when it sought to crack down on those who were using stabilizing braces as short-barreled rifles to evade the NFA. That's it. I would hope that the majority would reconsider their priorities moving forward. Let's work together to find some solutions to these consequential challenges. But this isn't it. That I can assure you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. It's been a long night, and I'm going to try to be pretty quick here because I don't think we're going to convince them, and I don't think they're going to convince us. But there's a few things I want to say. So much of this really is political. I guess folks don't want to admit it, but I mean, you had control. You had the and you've heard this before. You had the executive branch. You had the House. You had the Senate. And now it all gets blamed on us. You could have made change then. You had the majority in every single house, but it didn't happen. And it's always a political answer. You know why? Because it sounds so good. Let's take guns away from legal gun owners that 99.9% don't do anything wrong ever, but that will fix the problem. It won't fix the problem. So we'll make this brace illegal. Now, are you going to tell me because we make this brace illegal that criminals and those with mental health problems are going to, decide, gee, I can't use the brace anymore, so I'm just going to stop? They're breaking the law. They're murderers, or they have serious mental health issues. They're not going to change because you change a law. They are already used to breaking the law, and the people will still do it, will continue to do it. We do need to do things that was mentioned here a couple times, like making our schools safer. And I'd love people to join me on my bill, my Safe Schools bill, which would make sure that people just couldn't walk straight into a school, that before they walked in, they had to be buzzed in not once, but twice, and that you had a safety officer there. And the safety officer could make sure that things were safe in the inside. And I guarantee you that crime would go down in schools, that mass murderers would go down in schools. And in New York City, some folks, I guess, made fun of the victims. Even tonight you did. Well, the interesting thing about those victims, one got the living daylights beaten out of them, and the other two, it was victims of knives. So, we, I guess, could take knives away, but, we're always going to blame guns because guns are scary. People talk about guns, they don't even understand what really is an assault weapon, what's an automatic, what's a semi-automatic. Most of the people making the rules, most of the people doing the legislation don't even understand what they're doing legislation about. Well, I shoot at the range. Once to twice a week. I'm a gun owner. I believe in the Second Amendment, and those that say that older people, disabled people, and veterans aren't there using those devices aren't telling the truth. I don't know how else to say it. That's not accurate, because if you go there, you'll see them. Individuals who have enjoyed this for years, they're older, their hands are shaky, people that have neurologic problems, people that have other health issues, and the older veterans. Maybe if we had better prosecutors that didn't keep having a revolving door and turn bad people out, and areas where we keep making the rules tighter and harder for guns, Chicago, New York, California, the crimes are going up and the shootings are going up because we're letting bad people out of jail. But that doesn't matter, I guess. The truth is, those folks that commit those kind of aggressive crimes, those criminals should stay in jail for a good long time, maybe forever. And finally, like I said, I'd welcome anybody to join my Safe School Act if they really believe that they want to make a difference, because that will make a difference. Mr. Hunt was so right. His speech was so good. He was on the money. Here's somebody who's a veteran. Here's somebody who was in the military. Here's somebody who's in war. Here's somebody who understands guns, like the people at the range where I shoot. And they wouldn't even understand what half of you were talking about because it doesn't work. So make them illegal. Make these braces illegal, and let's see, because you're going to promise people it's going to make things better, how much better it gets.
Mr.
And you know
Andrew,
what?
will you yield for just one clarification?
No, I got to finish this. And
hoping right
you know
now.
what else it doesn't show? It doesn't show that the statistics show, look them up, when they were illegal in New Jersey in certain areas, it was no better crime-wise. It didn't make a difference. A bad person or a person with severe mental health problems are still going to commit crimes. And there's much better ways to go about that. We need more mental health work being done in our country. And I don't know who asked me, but I will yield.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman yields back. Appreciate the gentleman. The gentleman from California, Mr. Swalwell, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, it is 12:25 a.m. in the United States Congress, and if anyone wants to know what is the priority of their member of Congress, well, on the other side of the aisle for the Republican Party, at this early hour, it's to better arm the killers of our children. That's the priority. It's not, as Mr. Neguse said, to fight inflation. It's not to bring down the cost of health care. It's not to give women their own right to carry a baby. It's to make sure that every criminal in America has better access to a right to carry a device, as Mr. Neguse laid out, can kill innocent souls in our community. It's Midnight in Washington, a book also written by a colleague of mine just to the right. But it's Midnight in Washington, and my colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle are fighting to arm the killers. A lot of talk today about veterans, and that's great. I think we all want to do what we can to honor veterans. I thought it was interesting that 12 hours ago when Mr. Massie offered an amendment in an immigration bill to help veterans with the E-Verify system, almost everyone on his side voted against it. So it's clear where you draw the line when you want to help veterans. No one wanted to help the veterans when it came to immigration, but when it comes to this legislation, that's your fig leaf as far as why you're in favor of it. But I really want to address Mr. Van Drew, because he used the word ban about 10 times and the word illegal about 5 times. And there's nothing in this regulation that would ban a stabilizer. It's not a ban on a stabilizer. It's the crazy idea that it should be registered. It's not a ban at all. No one's talking about a ban. In fact, I think almost everyone on this side thinks that you should be able to take your kids hunting, go to the range and shoot for sport, and have a shotgun to protect yourself in your home for self-defense. That's what most of us believe. And so the registration requirement is not only within the mainstream of America, most research shows it's within the mainstream of gun-owning Republicans. So it's not a ban. And we're going to fight back and debunk all of the disinformation that you can continue to throw out. So when you drag us all over the country for your field hearings and you want to go to New York to talk about crime, we're going to tell you, Mr. Chairman, the crime rate in Mansfield, Ohio, also known as Danger City, comparative to Manhattan, doesn't fare so well. So we're going to continue to call it out. When you were dragging the committee to New York, there was a homicide in your hometown that the police were still trying to solve, used and committed with the firearm. So we're going to continue to call out the disinformation. This is not a ban. This is a registration requirement. No one here is talking about bans. And with that, I'll yield my remaining time to my colleague from Rhode Island.
No, I thank the gentleman for yielding. I think it's important to note that the figure that has been used was 40 million, 10 million, and I think Mr. Schiff made it very clear. When this device was first developed, it was to assist people who had disabilities. But as we saw from the video, it's now being marketed to turn this into a short barrel rifle. And all we're saying is if it is going to be that kind of a dangerous firearm, it's been regulated for a very long time, and it requires registration, plain and simple. And I think, Mr. Swalwell is right. It's 12:30 in the morning, and the only action that this Republican majority has taken in response to an epidemic of gun violence in this country is to attack a rule of the ATF that will help make these weapons less lethal and require a registration of a brace. That's the sum total of your response to the carnage of gun violence in this country. You have the majority. We'll stay here till 4 in the morning if you're serious about reducing gun violence. But instead, there was an argument made last time this hearing came up that we should abolish the ATF. I guess we should be grateful you stepped that back and you're just trying to abolish some of the good rules that they've promulgated. They're going to make us safer. Thank the gentleman for yielding. I yield back.
Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is late here, and, you know, Mr. Swalwell's been gone most of the day, but I just want to note real quickly that he just accused Republicans of, quote, wanting to arm killers. You know, and I just want to say, when you say outrageous things like that, you obviously diminish your own arguments and your own credibility. I represent Louisiana. We're nicknamed the sportsman's paradise. I mean, in Louisiana, we revere our Second Amendment rights. We hunt with our children. We teach them responsible gun safety and ownership. We're serious about preserving our fundamental freedoms and the great traditions of this country. And when you try to diminish people who stand for that, it undermines your own argument. Look, I'm telling you what my constituents in Louisiana see. When they think of the ATF, many people, when they see the ATF, they see that it's one of the alphabet agencies in Washington that was designed to serve the people and is being used against them. You have their authority that's being abused here. You have, as was pointed out earlier by Mr. Nels, you have the director of the ATF in front of Congress under oath who can't even describe his own job. He can't even adequately define the very firearms that he's supposed to be regulating. And it undermines the people's faith in our institutions and in this agencies that's just run amok. I want to yield my time to Mr. Massie because he has a lot to add to this.
Yeah, I think Mr. Johnson, depending on the state that you live in and your response to this ATF rule, it either will ban, register, or destroy stabilizing braces for pistols that resemble collapsible stocks. Do you know, and I think everybody on the other side of the aisle is about to get really surprised at what I'm about to say. Do you know what this doesn't ban, register, or destroy? Collapsible stocks. It only bans, registers, or destroys stabilizing braces for pistols that resemble collapsible stocks. There are even more collapsible stocks than there are stabilizing braces. Now, why doesn't this rule ban, destroy, or otherwise register collapsible stocks? Because they can't do it. There's no construction, even in their tortured legal logic that they've made, to ban, register, or destroy stabilizing braces that resemble collapsible stocks. They're not able to ban collapsible stocks. I've got these things laying around at home. It's a piece of plastic. There's honestly really no reason to regulate this piece of plastic. You could recreate one easily. So what are you going to do? Everything that the Democrats don't like is a loophole. I've tried to figure out what their definition of a loophole is. Everything they don't like is a loophole. So then I'm afraid they're going to be back and say there's the collapsible stock loophole. We, through regulation, not through lawmaking, but through regulatory fiat, somebody was able, some unelected bureaucrat was able to ban, register, or destroy something that resembled a collapsible stock, but they were not able to ban a collapsible stock. So you're not making anything less lethal. Now, those collapsible stocks, if you're a law-abiding citizen, have to be used on a rifle. Okay, what's the difference between a rifle, an AR-15 rifle, and an AR-15 pistol? Does anybody on the other side of the aisle know? I'll wait.
They don't even know what a collapsible stock is.
Well, because I think it's important. I'm always torn on whether I should help them understand what they're trying to ban. The difference between an AR-15 pistol or an AR-15 rifle.
No takers.
No takers. It's about 6 or 8 inches in length. A barrel on a rifle has to be 16 inches, and a pistol is anything less than that that doesn't have something designed or intended to be fired from the shoulder. So you're not getting rid of these things. What you're doing, you know, there's a saying, if guns are outlawed, only outlaws will have guns. That's supposed to be a prediction, but I think the Biden administration used that as an instruction. And they said, well, we can create a bunch of outlaws by banning a piece of plastic. And that's what they've done, and that's what's going to happen on June 1st. Millions of felons who don't realize they're felons. And these are serious felonies. This is not a civil infraction, are going to be created. And just, well, if I have more time later, I'll get to the fact or the non